Traveling to Ukraine this year has felt different, more tense even than the months after the 2022 full-scale invasion. The new sense of anxiety was palpable before I entered the country. My flight landed in Lublin, Poland, the closest major Polish airport to the Ukrainian border. But I couldn't get off the plane. The airport had been temporarily shut down. Overnight, NATO jets shot down a swarm of Russian drones that had entered Polish airspace, and the country was on high alert. In that atmosphere, a set of unattended bags at Lublin Airport understandably triggered an emergency search. The dominant facts of life in Ukraine are now Russian drone attacks, and therefore ubiquitous air raid warnings. For the first time since the war began, I downloaded an app that notifies me about air alerts. Most attacks come after dark, and locals complain about endless nights of constant interruptions, trips to shelters, and sleeplessness. Many have turned their phones off, banking on Ukraine's air defense system that so far has intercepted most incoming projectiles. But the Russians are getting better, and some of them do get through, as happened last weekend when an Iskander cruise missile hit the main government building in the heart of Kyiv, which houses the offices of many cabinet ministers. Kyiv is still a beautiful and lively city, full of cafes and trendy shops. But all this is now overlaid by a jittery new normal. Some people talk about leaving Kyiv simply to get away from the air raids and sleeplessness. Others have devised their own strategies to cope. But none of this translates into a weakening of resolve. Surrender is not really an option. For most, this is a battle for their survival as a nation. People just seem resigned to a grim, long fight. In a way, the mood inside Ukraine mirrors some of the realities outside. There was some sense of movement a few months ago. President Trump seemed determined and energized to end the war. He even appeared to have a plan of sorts that might have seemed unjust, but was a practical strategy in its own way. He would force Ukraine to accept terms that seemed likely to get Putin to agree to end the war. American officials, including Trump, made clear that Russia would likely get to keep what it had conquered, that Ukraine would never become a member of NATO, that the U.S. would not send in troops to guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty, and that Trump looked forward to re-engaging with Russia economically after the war was over. In other words, before even getting to the negotiating table, Washington agreed to most Russian demands. It didn't work. Despite those preemptive concessions, despite a personal invitation to Putin to negotiate with Trump, despite a warm red carpet welcome, Putin stood his ground. His demands for Ukraine have always been maximalist. He wants a Ukraine that is territorially dismembered, economically precarious, and militarily weak. This would make it like Belarus and Georgia, other parts of Russia's czarist sphere of influence, totally beholden to Moscow. Any outcome that allows for a sovereign, independent, pro-Western liberal democracy with a functioning market economy would be for Putin a dangerous loss. The peace overtures and concessions seem to have convinced Putin that far from backing down, he can press forward. In the last few weeks, Russian attacks have damaged an American factory in Western Ukraine and the offices of the British Council and the European Union mission headquarters in Kyiv. And it has now violated Polish airspace. Until the incursion into Poland, there had been no Western response other than words of condemnation. Putin seems to be following Lenin's famous probe with bayonets strategy, as recounted by Richard Nixon of all people. Quote, "If you encounter mush, proceed. If you encounter steel, withdraw." Finally, after the violation of Polish airspace, NATO fighter jets were activated and shot down the Russian drones. Some here feel that Europe is often slow and feckless, but no one doubts that it wants Ukraine to win this war. The central question in everyone's mind is, what is the Trump administration's actual goal? Trump speaks of putting pressure on Putin, but then does this in a bizarre, indirect fashion, punishing India for buying Russian oil under an oil cap scheme promoted by Washington, rather than punishing Russia itself.
Again, Mr. President,
He talks about
thank you
ending
very
the
much
war,
indeed.
but speaks fondly of Putin and the economic deals that America will make with him. Neither he nor anyone in his administration acts like securing a free and independent Ukraine is itself a crucial goal. The administration has never outlined a plan to help Ukraine fight with greater military might, the only real pressure that Russia will feel immediately. And as long as what Putin hears from Washington is mush, he will keep pressing his bayonet forward. Go to cnn.com/Fareed for a link to my Washington Post column this week.